Let's suppose that you were able every night to dream any dream you wanted to dream, and that you could have the power within one night to dream 75 years of time. And you would naturally, as you began on this adventure of dreams, fulfill all your wishes. But now let's have a surprise. Let's have a dream which isn't under control. And then you would get more and more adventurous. And you would make further and further out gambles as to what you would dream. And finally, you would dream where you are now.
This is a journey we'll all be taking together over the next few years. Ultimately, we're committing to enabling everyone to experience that next level of realism. Hopefully, I've been able to illustrate a bit about our design and decision-making process today, and why PlayStation 5 has the feature set that it does. Now comes the fun part. We get to see how the development community takes advantage of that feature set. I'm hoping for the completely unexpected. Will it come from audio, ray tracing, the capabilities of the SSD, or something else? I guess we'll find out soon enough. Thank you for your time today.
What's good with y'all? It's your boy AD, and to be honest, the current Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 battle right now is very much needed, as everybody being quarantined and having to practice social distancing is leading to a lot more attention being placed on video games and just the gaming industry in general. So obviously we're going to be getting into the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, and a little rundown on both of those consoles is that the Xbox Series X is an upcoming home video game console developed by Microsoft and was announced during E3 2019 as Project Scarlet, which is why most people thought that the Xbox Series X would be called the Project Scarlet. And for the PlayStation 5, it's an upcoming home video game console developed by Sony Interactive Entertainment. There's going to be a lot of technical jargon throughout this video, so just bear with me, as the most important specs for the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 I will be repeating throughout this video, so you know what to really focus in on. But some side notes of the Xbox Series X and PS5: they both will have custom built processors made in partnerships with AMD, which is no surprise, they've worked with AMD in the past, and they will also have 8 CPU cores based on AMD's popular Zen 2 7 nanometer process with simultaneous multi-threading enabled. The main processor for both of these consoles will be pretty big, as it will be a noticeable leap over the last generation in both processing power and efficiency, which is something that should be assumed that will be in the next gen console. Unlike the desktop PC, for consoles the main selling point is the games, which allows them to consolidate their hardware features for optimal cost efficiency, so that game developers making their games for these consoles will make them the most money in the long run. Because for those that don't know, consoles don't really recoup off of the initial launch of the consoles. The way that they do bring themselves back into the black is whenever they drop their exclusive video game. So the most notable example I have for this will be when God of War and Spider-Man PS4 dropped exclusively for the PlayStation 4, because that was the most revenue they made throughout the whole PlayStation 4 generation. So just to put in perspective, it's not the consoles that make the companies the most money, it's the licensing of the titles that they give out to the public. So really Microsoft and PlayStation could care less how these consoles sell, they just want to have exclusives to cash out in the long run. But before we get more into the Xbox Series X and the PS5, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, while also sharing this to help my channel grow. So starting with the names, obviously the PlayStation 5, Sony came out the gate with an official name for the next gen console, and surprising but not really, it's called PlayStation PlayStation 5, PS5 for short. PlayStation really kept it simple with their name, but on the flip side with Microsoft, they kind of went the opposite route in simplicity, as at first they were referring to the next gen console as Project Scarlet, but at the Game Awards 2019 is when they officially announced that the name would be Xbox Series X. For parents trying to buy their kids consoles and just looking at the different names, PS5 will stand out more as an upgrade than the Xbox Series X, because people really go off of word of mouth, and trying to explain to someone that the Xbox Series X is the upgrade from the Xbox One X is harder than explaining the PS5 is an upgrade from the PS4, because you think about numbers, 5 is more than 4. But getting into cost, which is a frequently asked question, Jason Ronald, Microsoft's partner director of program management, gave a statement regarding this and said, quote, "We understand what reasonable price points are for a console and kind of what customers expect about that. At the same time, to you, we are innovating, we are pushing the boundaries of some of this." And he also went on to say, "We are not sharing any details on price or, more detailed specs at this point, but I will say that we're very confident in what we are building, something that will set a new bar for expectations of console gaming." So just to summarize the statement that he gave, he basically said a lot of words to say nothing, and we can speculate what the next gen console will probably end up costing. Like I said earlier in this video, Microsoft and PlayStation do not make their money back from launching these consoles, they make it from licensing their exclusive titles. Diving into the price point of the Xbox Series X, going off the Xbox One and the Xbox One X, even just saying these names, I can see how it could be confusing from the jump just listening to this. For the Xbox One and Xbox One X, they launched at $499, and so you can expect that the Xbox Series X, being more powerful than both of those consoles and more powerful than the PS5, will not come any cheaper, as the specs that they had to make the console were definitely not cheaper. So I would say for the Xbox Series X, it will most likely launch at $599. And for the PlayStation 5, figuring out this price point, the PS4 and the PS4 Pro both launched at $399. So there's a fairly good chance that the PS5 will be more than that, as like I said with the Xbox Series X, the specs and hardware is harder to make for a more powerful console, so it won't be less, and it most likely won't be the same price point. So I assume that this will come in at the same launch price as they had for the PS3, which launched at $499. So basically, I'm assuming that the price point for the Xbox Series X will be $599, and for the PlayStation 5, it will be $499. But as always, after 2 or 3 months of these consoles being out, there's going to be a lot of discounts and bundles with popular video games to make the price point more acceptable. Moving on to the release date, both these consoles are currently set to be released within the same window, and the most sense for these consoles to launch will be the holiday season late this year. But personally, if I had to guess, I would say November 2020. They do not want to miss out on that holiday spending. So if you plan on buying both, I would start saving now, because these consoles are not going to be cheap at all. Speaking a little bit more on the release date, it may get delayed or pushed back because of the coronavirus, with everything going around and with everybody being self-quarantined. I believe that the parts for the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 will be harder to move around and get to certain GameStops or just certain markets. So don't be surprised if those get delayed into 2021, because they don't have the hardware available to them to put these consoles together. Then they're most likely just going to delay it all together. And also with the coronavirus, a lot of people are out of a job, so they don't have the funds available to just spend on the next gen console. So I believe this will end up getting pushed back, as nobody's really going to have this disposable income to buy a next gen console. Getting into the details of the consoles, even though everything hasn't been put out yet about the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, we have enough to start comparing them and to actually give an educated guess on which console will be more powerful. So throughout this section of the video, I'm going to be talking about the different specs on different consoles, while also putting up the list of specs that we have so far. So starting with the PS5, the GPU, like I said before, is heavily customized variant of AMD Radeon's Navi, which can simulate 3D audio and support ray tracing. It offers 10.28 teraflops paired with 16 gigabytes of RAM for storage, and it has a custom 825 gigabyte SSD card with space for bonus SSDs. And this will allow to better simulate light in games. And the list of specs, like I said, will be on the screen right now for you to see. And while you're looking at those specs, I'm going to talk about the biggest takeaways from what you're looking at. The biggest difference between all of these specs is the CPU, GPU, and SSD storage for each console. And for the Xbox Series X, it edges out the PlayStation in that aspect. But getting into the gap is pretty small, as they'll probably be identical in terms of performance. And as far as the GPU, the Xbox Series X has more power, but each platform probably be limited by the game developers going to the lowest common denominator. Because even if it's slightly more graphically enhanced on Xbox, it won't be a huge gap, just like the PS5 PS4 and the Xbox One. And really the teraflops doesn't matter as much because it's not that big of a gap, like I just said, and the teraflops depends on how the game developer uses them. So let's say they use 9.8, well the PS5 has 10 and the Xbox Series X has 12, but the game developer maxed out their video game to 9, so they'll still end up looking the same. So really don't pay too much attention to the numbers that they throw out, just know that it depends on how the game developers use them. Like Rockstar, I believe they'll use it to their full capabilities, but not every AAA studio has the resources available to push the video games to the max capabilities of the consoles. And some more of the senseless numbers that Microsoft and PlayStation has been throwing around, both consoles will natively support 4K resolutions at 60 frames per second, and also a promise of supporting 8K and frame rates up to 120 Hz. And it looks like the PS5 versus the Xbox Series X are both consoles natively support 4K resolutions at 60 frames per second, and promise, keyword is promise, support of 8K and frame rates up to 120 Hz. And the SSD is something that keeps coming up in these spec talks because it's one of the biggest features asked for by game developers, and that's why it's in both of these next gen consoles, as Microsoft promises that the SSD will offer up to 40 times faster read speeds than the Xbox One family of systems. So to summarize all this spec talk with the Microsoft and Sony, both of them believe that the engineered system will offer improvements to performance, graphics, and audio immersion over what we've seen in the Xbox One and PS4 Pro era, which is something you expect from the next gen consoles. But getting into what people are most asking for in the next gen consoles, the long loading times, the constant patching, download times, and inconsistent performances on the biggest games, kind of like Rockstar titles, the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 are looking to eliminate these, as with the SSD, they'll have more capabilities to eliminating those than they did in the past. And the biggest example of this is if you want to look up on YouTube leaked PS5 gameplay reveal, it shows the highly popular Spider-Man PS4 game loading time compared to the PS4 Pro, and on average the loading time for the PS4 Pro was 15 seconds, and on the PlayStation 5 dev kit it was 0.8 seconds. So you can ask yourself what that does for you, but for me, Spider-Man PS4 wasn't made for the PlayStation 5, it was made for the PlayStation 4, so I would assume the loading time should be tremendously shorter on the PlayStation 5. But once these titles start being pushed farther in capabilities for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, I think it will all level out. Getting into the PS5 controller, it's not clear yet if they'll be calling this the DualShock 5, but it is clear that it seems pretty similar to the DualShock 4, as a few changes are a USB-C charging port, larger triggers, and no more light bar. The Xbox Series X, on the other hand, new controller has a slight reduction in size, a share button, and a hybrid 4-way and 8-way directional pad. And the main reason for this being called the Xbox Series X is that the rest of the consoles are streamlined, meaning you'll be able to use the Xbox One controller with the Xbox Series X and the new Series X controller on the Xbox One, which is a pretty cool feature and something that Microsoft is pushing for to make the transition to their next gen console smoother. Now the online service for Microsoft and Sony haven't been announced, but we assume that for Microsoft it will be Xbox Live Gold, and for PS5 it will be the PlayStation Plus, as these have been the successful money making machine for them in the past. The Xbox Game Pass will be a large part of this Xbox Series X experience, and the only key difference right now in this state of the gaming industry is that Google entered the gaming industry in November 2019 with Stadia, but that hasn't been a success. Every notable game developer is taking their titles off of Stadia, but as far as Microsoft and Sony rebuttal to Google Stadia, Microsoft has Project xCloud and Sony has PlayStation Now, so that's their response to cloud gaming. Getting into the playable games at launch, Bluepoint Games, the studio behind Uncharted and Shadow of Colossus remasters, is working on a big title that hasn't been announced yet for the next gen console. And then Gearbox's recently announced game Godfall will be on the PS5, as it's set to come out holiday 2020 alongside the console. Microsoft of course has Halo as their Series X launch title, but they have showcased some other titles like Hellblade 2 at the Game Awards 2019, but no further word has been said about this game. I don't really care too much for these games. For me, the games I'm looking to see what platform they're going to be on is the God of War sequel, the Spider-Man sequel, and the other popular exclusives that were on the PS4, and seeing if they're going to go to Xbox and PlayStation, or if they're just going to stick with PlayStation, and that would be the main selling point for me in which console I get. Now, one of the last things to note in this Xbox versus PlayStation battle is the backwards compatibility, and the PS5 will not have any PS1, PS2, or PS3 backwards compatibility, which is not good news for PlayStation gamers, as that's one of the most requested features in any next gen launch for a console. So for the PS5, it will only have about 100 PS4 games that will work at launch for the PS5, and I assume PlayStation will work more to extend that backwards compatibility compatibility library, but for right now, that's just what it is. And for Microsoft, it's the complete opposite, as the Xbox Series X has been confirmed to have backwards compatibility that will span over the 4 generations worth of games, which is why it's called Xbox Series X, because everything is streamlined. So whatever game you can play on the Xbox 360 is the same game you can play on the Xbox Series X. And that's one of the main selling points for Microsoft right now. And it's probably why the title is so confusing, because they're trying to let us know that this is a series, not an exclusive premium console. So now we're going to get into what the fans think of the Xbox versus PlayStation battle. And starting with the first Twitter user, he's basically comparing the last gen 2013 to this current gen right now by showing a specific stat with the teraflops being tremendously greater now than it was back then, which is to be expected, but it's still nice to see, because as you can see, it gets consumers like this excited to see what this actually looks like. Getting into the next Twitter user, he's getting into what he thinks about the PS5 and the Xbox Series X specs, as he gives his overall thoughts on what he believes these consoles to be. And in my opinion, he really nailed this on the head, as the PS5 is really the fastest, but the Xbox Series X is the most powerful console. The only thing wrong I see, if I was to nitpick, is that the pricing seems a little optimistic, as Microsoft and PlayStation will most likely lose money with the launch of the next gen consoles, but they're definitely not going to lose more than they have to. So these prices I don't think is realistic, but you never know. Moving on to the third Twitter user, this person seems to be a PC gamer, as he's talking about the Xbox Series versus the PS5 and just saying how he's still staying on PC, as PC is the best option, which it really is. If you want to get into gaming and you have the funds to buy a PC, it will be the best option, as the PC gamers get the best parts frequently upgraded, as for consoles there's set capabilities to make it easier on the game developers. 9 times out of 10 the PC gamer has the better specs, but for consoles they probably have the better games. As for the PlayStation 4, I keep bringing this up, but this was one of the biggest plot twists in the PS4 Xbox One battle, and it was the God of War, Spider-Man PS4 launches, because so many people went out and bought a console just to play these games. But if you're only looking at hardware and games running smoother, I would get a PC. But as far as exclusives, I feel like consoles still are holding that down, and Xbox did say something about their exclusives going to PC, but let's be honest, Xbox really doesn't get that many exclusives outside of Halo. So moving on to the final Twitter user, he seems to be a basketball fan, but at the same time a gamer, as he's saying instead of the March Madness going on in the NCAA, we'll be getting Xbox versus PS5, and he seems ecstatic, as it is what is currently happening right now with the current state of events. Everybody's quarantining themselves, so the only way to entertain themselves for most people is playing video games, which is why these announcements are being made by PlayStation and Microsoft, because basically everybody who has access to the internet, their attention is being focused on other things to entertain them. So Microsoft and PlayStation are probably going to try to capitalize off of that. So in summary, the biggest question that the people have with this Xbox versus PS5 is, which console should I buy? And my answer is pretty simple. It's whatever console that you feel like works for you. And when I say that, when you lay out the facts, the PS5 will most likely, in my opinion, have better exclusives. But as of right now, putting the specs side by side, the Xbox Series X is more powerful, but only if the game developers push their titles to meet those capabilities. So pick the console that most of your friends are playing on, so you won't be outcast because of your affiliation with a certain company. So don't look at these as Team Xbox, Team PlayStation. Look at what each console specifically offers to you, and then make your decision based on that. But let me know, which console are you looking forward to buying, the Xbox Series X or the PlayStation 4? And let me know why. In my opinion, I'm leaning towards getting the PlayStation 5, just because I believe that the God of War and Spider-Man sequels will end up being exclusive to the PS5, and that's something that I do not want to miss out on, because last time I had to switch over because I was late to the PlayStation party. So depending on if they come out and say that those games aren't going to be exclusive to the PlayStation 5, I may get the Xbox Series X, but for me, what it all comes down to is just the exclusive. So yeah, that's it for the video. If you enjoyed this, make sure to let me know by hitting that like button, subscribe, and share this with your friend, neighbor, dog, or just send this to the person across the street complaining about Star Wars Jedi The Fallen Order's loading screens, because without them, this wouldn't be possible. And with that, I'm out.